Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special transfer deadline day episode of the Rams Review Podcast. It's Corey along with you today. There's deals all over the place. Jadon Sancho potentially going to Chelsea. Victor Osimhen's move to Saudi Arabia looks like it's collapsed, but Ivan Toney's deal is potentially still on the table. But we're not really worried about those guys because they're not very good. We're worried about the greatest team in the world, and that is Derby County, dealing with probably another great team in the world, and that's Liverpool. Derby reportedly close to signing a deal with Liverpool center half Nat Phillips on a season-long loan deal that would show him, send him to Pride Park. So to join me, there was only one person we were ever going to get, one group of guys we were ever going to get to talk all things Liverpool and Nat Phillips, and that's Neil Atkinson, the boss at the Anfield Wrap. Neil, thanks for joining me on such short notice. Happy transfer deadline day to you.
Indeed. Doesn't look at this point in time like Liverpool are going to add to Federico Chiesa at the time of recording. You never know with these things. But Nat Phillips has gone to Derby. It'll be in a way, it's his last act as a Liverpool player, because at the end of this period, he's out of contract as a Liverpool player. So he's made the move to Pride Park for a season that I'm intrigued by what your expectations are from a Derby point of view, because Phillips he's been part of two good championship sides whilst he's been on loan. So what is the expectation for Derby for the rest of the season, and can Nat Phillips match it?
Yeah, I think definitely Derby need, I think a week ago, Neil, they said Derby needed about 8 players. Looks like we're not going to get anywhere close to 8 players, but I think another center half helps a great deal for Derby, especially with the way that the manager likes to play with 3 center halves. So hopefully Nat Phillips can come in and get some game time and put himself in the shop window for a potential move in January, or a potential move, because, a loan can be made permanent in January, or a potential move in the summer elsewhere. And like you said, he's had a couple of successful spells in the championship, and he's also played a couple of buckets, quite a few games for Liverpool as well. Because if I remember a couple of years ago, after Liverpool won the Premier League title, they had that horrific year where they had 14, 15 center halves injured, all one point. And they had the center half of, they went from Joel Matip and Virgil van Dijk to Nat Phillips, and I believe it was Ozan Kabak at the back for that kind of spell for that season. Neil, is his Liverpool career over? Nat Phillips, is this a move that Liverpool's you're not part of the furniture, you're moving on, and we're going to get you a good spot to try to get a move?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is Liverpool's last. Liverpool gave him a contract in the summer of 2021 after then. So it'll be 4 years next summer when it's finished. And, Liverpool use him sparingly after that point. But I think it's worth saying that when Liverpool do give him the contract, they don't know how Virgil van Dijk's going to come back. They don't know how long it's going to take for him to be tip-top. They don't know how long Joe Gomez is going to take. They don't know what they're going to get from Konate. Matip was out for 6 months as well. So I think that Liverpool were backed into a bit of a corner to give this lad, who, by the way, does finish that season strongly, a deal that he may never have got from Liverpool at any other time. None of that is to seem like I'm at all cross about it. I'm not. Footballers should always look to get the best deal they can from the clubs, and I think that Phillips did that. The flip side of that, though, I think has led there to be a situation where it's difficult for Liverpool to move him on permanently. So I think that even now, I suspect Derby will not be paying all of Nat Phillips's wage off the back of this move. But Liverpool have found him a good club to go and be able to perform at, and then from there they'll let him go next summer on a free transfer. He will leave Liverpool. He will need to go and get another contract somewhere else from the outset. But that could be Derby. I think he's an interesting player when you look at his time at Liverpool. In that, I think there'll be a desire to sort of paint him as a no nonsense centre back, which I think he is. But I think he comes on leaps and bounds when he gets a lot of focus from Liverpool and from Jurgen Klopp in terms of what he can do with the ball at his feet. That's not to say, he becomes some sort of silky, he doesn't overnight become Paolo Maldini, but I think he becomes a much more comfortable central defender in terms of being able to pass the ball forward, punch it through the lines, back his control. I think when he shows confidence in himself, I think he comes on. The biggest issue I think he has as a player really is, as a centre-back, is pace and pace on the turn. Everything else I think he can, do to a reasonable standard. I think his biggest issue is just what happens when everything's going behind him. And he's not alone in that. There's a lot of central defenders historically, currently, who do not want to be turning round. I'd argue all central defenders don't want to be turning round, but there's some of them who are better at it than others. So I think that will be, when he goes to Derby, I think that'll be the key question. I think he shows a lot in 2020, 2021 in terms of his ability. It's worth saying he doesn't just, play League Cup games. Liverpool, and he doesn't, Liverpool don't have a great season, but they have the best run of the season when Nat Phillips is at centre-back. They win big games. Liverpool win 4-2 at Old Trafford. Nat Phillips is a centre-back when Liverpool do that. He plays a significant, meaningful part in that running. And then he plays some other games for Liverpool after then. Goes to Bournemouth, is part of their promotion charge side, and goes to Cardiff last season and is part of the side that has slightly hard lines. The only place where it appears to have really not worked for him is Celtic. And I think Celtic, the way they want to play, the way they are in Scotland, is really front foot and it's quite high line. I think that's his biggest issue. I think he can play in a side that wants to be aggressive and wants to play progressive football, but I just don't think he can do it and play in a high line. I think everything else he's got, everything else you could need, he could have. He reads the game well. But I think the most important thing, the thing I would genuinely sort of say is excellent, I think his temperament in terms of being calm through games, backing himself, confidence. I think that in lots of ways is his biggest asset, along with the amount of determination he has as well to put whatever it takes on the line. But he doesn't do that in a sort of a demonstrative way. He just does it because it's the thing he has to do. For me, he's a good controlled centre-back, and I think if Derby play some good stuff this season, he'll be a real asset for Derby. The question is, he just can't do it on the halfway line. He can defend an 18-yard box, he can't defend a halfway line, and there's a gradation as you go all the way through.
Neil, as the season's panning out, Derby, we won't be attacking much from the halfway line. We'll be pretty much penned back, so that'll be good. And you never know, in a back three with two other center halves around him, it might allow him license, even if he has to turn two other center halves can kind of cover down on him. And I think it's important to note, Neil, that it's not necessarily a knock at Nat Phillips that his Liverpool times come to a finish. I mean, you're mentioning this is arguably, we're in the era of one of the greatest, if not the greatest Liverpool team of all time. Yeah. With some of the players. I mean, nobody's going to get in ahead of Virgil van Dijk. Personally, for me, best center half in the world. Konate, French and nationals, played at World Cups, up and coming. They've had Joel Matip. So it's not like, oh, he's just some scrub at Liverpool who can't make the grade. He's played games for Liverpool. He's played well at Liverpool, but unfortunately, they have world-class players ahead of him, and so he just can't get games.
Very much so, and he's also, to your point there, he's also played well in big games. I think that's the most important thing. He's played big games, but he's also played well in them, and he's played well with the pressure on as well. I'd have no real concerns about that. For me, that's part of what he is as a player. I think he's a good player, and I ultimately think he'll end up being one of those players whose level is somewhere between the Championship and the Premier League. But where Derby are at the minute, which is just newly promoted from League One, therefore I think it's a little bit of a coup. I think he's in that grey area of players, which always feels like it's a bit more of a criticism than it is. There's some attackers, I think especially attackers, this happens to more, but I think there are players who are a bit too good for the Championship and just not quite able to work at a Premier League level. And I think as the Premier League continues to change a little bit as a league and develop, and the quality of player that you've got, where, for instance, Brian Mbeumo plays for Brentford, but would probably get in most sides that play Champions League football across the continent. But Brentford are going to finish 13th. And therefore, to defend Mbeumo, you need to be a very, very good defender. And then, he's recently made a fool of Mark Gay. He was getting knocked around as a £70 million defender, but he beats him for the goal that Brentford scored against Crystal Palace first game of the season. It's therefore difficult if you are a defender of, the ability to play at the top end of the Championship. If 12 of your games year in, year out are against sides that are going to finish somewhere between, ultimately, when you do the maths of it, 33rd to 45th in the English pyramid, that is quite different to the challenge that now is coming up against playing Premier League football week in, week out, when, as I say, Jarrod Bowen is not this season playing European football, but Jarrod Bowen, we all know, is Champions League class. So that is the challenge, really, and that's why I think that grey area of players all the way through, but I think especially at the business end of the pitch, attack and defence, are going to find it difficult to get their level. But that's where I think he is. So my point being here is that if Derby's expectation over the course of the season is to finish about 12th in the Championship, I think that Phillips is good enough to be playing for a side who are going to finish at the top of the Championship or top 5 in the Championship. So therefore, I think he's a good signing.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's good to hear, Neil. You touched on this a little bit, but I want to go in a little bit more detail, strengths and weaknesses. You touched on it a little bit. I did see a clip he did do like a Cruyff turn in the box against AC
yeah.
Milan in the Champions League. So obviously the lad has got a bit of ball skill, but just, refresh, because you mentioned it slightly earlier, strengths of Nat Phillips.
Yeah, I think there's a game he plays when he first sort of ends up being needing to be relied on at Liverpool, where we go away to Newcastle and around the sort of the Christmas time of 2020, going into 2021, when the pandemic, football is arguably at its nadir, and the pandemic is, breaking all of our spirits. And Phillips is really poor on the ball. But part of the reason why he's really poor on the ball is he doesn't back himself at any point. So he's really conservative with his passing. It's laborious. He takes a touch, he takes another touch, he shifts the ball safely, gets it back, takes a touch, takes another touch. The opposition have got time to fall back into shape. And then he doesn't feature for Liverpool for about 6 weeks. And then Klopp brings him back. And as he begins to bring him back for the run-in, the big things that he starts to do is he starts to pass forwards much more and do so quickly and with confidence. And I think that's what they went away and worked on with him. But I don't think it was about the idea of like rebuilding his technique or anything like that. It was as much about sort of imbuing him with confidence that he can do this. Because that's, let's be clear about this. Most professional footballers are really, really good at football. All facets of football they're really, really good at. And I think he ends up, I think that's what they went away and worked on with him. That Klopp had to back a centre-back because just didn't have any of them. And he ends up backing Phillips. And the Phillips who comes back looks much more confident on the ball. To me, this again is about his temperament. I think if he's got his temperament right, I think he's a good ball player. I don't think it is as simple as he's the sort of lad who will end up wearing a bandage on his head because he puts his head everywhere. That's true as well. But I don't think he's just some sort of cliche in amongst that. But he's got to be confident to be able to do that. I'd like to think that now he has that confidence, full stop. He's done it at the highest level of English football. He's won games at the highest level of English football, and he's passed forward whilst doing so with confidence. So I think if he's got that confidence going down to championship level, he should back himself. He's wins his headers, wins his battles, great on the deck, good recovery challenges, reads the game well. Just the question is just simply pace. Pace on the turn, pace going backwards. That is, for me, he's not going to pass the ball like Virgil van Dijk. That's not what I'm saying. But he can pass the ball forward like an adequate central defender in the bottom half of the Premier League. He can do that, and we've seen him do that. The point being is that what he can't do, as I say, is just play high. I don't think you can realistically think you can pick him in a team with a high line unless you've got a really, really quick covering central defender who plays next to him. Unless you've got an absolute greyhound next to him who's aware of the fact that he'll go and be aggressive, but he might lose the ball. He'll be aggressive in all phases, but I think the closer he is to his own goal, the more that'll suit. So that is, in sort of one paragraph in a way, that is the weakness. But the rest are the strengths. So I think and again now he's got really good experience. He's got really good experience at the level he's going to go and play at. He's got really good experience through his career, and in terms of the no nonsense centre back stuff, he can very much do that as well. And his commitment, from everything I've ever seen, is second to none.
Yeah, it's good to hear that he's a bit of a hybrid. He's not scared to put his head in where it hurts, but he could also be more of that modern center half. And he's not just a big slab head guy heading into the back of the net, kicking everything that moves, and having the right temperament, I think, is really important, especially for a lad who's, I think he's 25 now, 26. So, good age for him to move, I think. And it's a good time, Neil, for him to start getting games. And obviously, hopefully comes to Derby and does really well. And he's a player that comes with experience, which is helpful because when he comes into a league and, championship's tough, he already is adjusted to it. He knows kind of what to expect and things like that.
Yeah, I would say that absolutely. We do an award every year, well, not every year, but sort of for the last 5 or 6 seasons, and it's been called the Embodiment of Liverpool Awards. It's not Player of the Year. That's not what we're asking for. We ask our listeners to vote, and what they get to vote for is a player they feel embodied Liverpool over the course of the season. And in 2021, that season, he won it. So he was voted the Embodiment of Liverpool Award by our listeners that season. Just to show as well, by the way, that it's very much it's an honest vote, because trust me, we get to go and present it in person, and if we're lucky, get an interview with the person. So we'd much rather it went to Mo Salah, but the truth of it was that that's who our listeners voted for. They voted for Nat Phillips because they felt as though he'd embodied Liverpool that year, and everyone who went, a few went down to present him with it. It was whilst everyone had to be a little bit distanced and all that sort of stuff, but everyone just spoke so highly of him, and everyone spoke highly of him around the club as well in terms of his commitment, in terms of the way in which he is around the place. So again, I think that's a positive too. You know, I ultimately just think that Derby are getting a good player, and I think that the idea that he knows himself, he's out of contract at the end of this season. You know, it might be that he can play well enough for Derby that they make him an offer. It might be that, you know, he gets an offer from a club at the top of the Championship because they like what they see. He's got, when I say he's got something to prove, you know, I think he's shown at that level, given the appearances he got for Bournemouth and for Cardiff, and how well both sides did whilst he was there. You know, I don't think he's got anything to prove there, but the idea that he's, you know, worthy of a good contract from a good Championship club, and that Championship club could be Derby, it's worth saying that. It's just the the overall trajectory the club's on may well be the question, but, you know, I think if the Derby plan is just to consolidate in the division, which it sounds like it is, then I think he can definitely be a part of that.
Well, Neil, appreciate your time and efforts into Nat Phillips. But before I let you go, I want to talk about a few Liverpool aspects, if I may, outside of Nat Phillips, because you are the authority. When I think of Liverpool,
Well,
I think of you in the Anfield
Arne
Wrap.
Slot is. I mean, we'll let Arne Slot be the most in charge.
Let's talk about Arne Slot. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp had massive success at Liverpool, and I think when a lot of people, you know, Jurgen Klopp will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest manager in Liverpool history. You know, that's up for debate, but Arne Slot's basically got the exact same team. He signed a couple of players, which we'll talk about in a minute. How emotional was it saying goodbye to Jurgen? I know obviously you guys at the Anfield Wrap had done a huge, great, you know, insight on him, and you've met him several times and things like that. How are you feeling about the Arne Slot era and how it started at Liverpool and your hopes for going forward?
I mean, first and foremost, saying goodbye to Jurgen was obviously deeply emotional because so much of what Jurgen was about was depth of emotional connection in every single facet of football and arguably life, the way Jurgen goes about being who he is. You know, I think he's a remarkably unique person, really. I think he's about as unique as you can conceive of. I don't think Jurgen quite understands how unique he is. I think he just thinks everyone should just be a bit like him, and probably is, and if they just all put their mind to it a bit more, then it'll be fine. So I think he misses almost like the rest of humanity in that strange way, because I think he very much is surrounded by people who are the best versions of themselves when they're around Jurgen. That's his magic. His magic is he makes people want to be the best version of themselves. And then they are. And then Jurgen's like, well, everyone's great. You know, that was the incredible thing about him. And in amongst lots of other things, let's be clear, it wasn't just all hugs and decency and kindness. He was a brilliant football coach. But I think part of that was he does have that sort of magnetic personality. So saying goodbye to that person is difficult. But Jurgen himself couldn't have made it any easier, really. And, you know, I think that he couldn't have done more without it being over the top in terms of making it as straightforward for Arne Slot as possible, both in a sporting and tactical sense, in a cultural sense, with reference to the personalities he's left behind in that squad, and also in the cultural sense of what he did for Slot in terms of just that really honest, emotional goodbye, that idea that he'll always be present one way or another, but also he's gone and now someone else has got to do it and they need full backing, and that's the only way it'll work. The fact that he was open about the fact that he had no part of the decision, it wasn't a Ferguson Moyes situation. You know, it's very much like someone else has got to do this. I can't do this. They're responsible. They go from there. And a couple of phone calls, and that's been the end of it. But it was a really good end, and it allowed a fresh beginning. And so far, I think Slot, the best thing you can say about him is he's very much both on the pitch and off the pitch being his own man. And that man is quite a different one to Jurgen, I think. Off the pitch, I think he's not the same sort of, at this point anyway, you know, the same sort of deeply well-rounded, charismatic human that Jurgen Klopp was. That's not to say he's not a charismatic football coach or that his players aren't responding to him. I think it's astonishing how quickly his players have responded to him and how quickly they're already putting, you know, you can very much see the stamp of Slot on this team. But instead he's not, you know, he's not trying to be sort of father of the nation in the way in which Jurgen Klopp just was. That's always been the way in which Jurgen coaches and leads. You look at his time at Mainz, you look at his time at Dortmund and at Liverpool. On three different scales, he very much is, you know, leader of the people. This is how we'll do it. This is the way in which I'll do it. I'll bring you together. We'll go from there. Slot doesn't need to do that because Jurgen's done it. So it's worth saying again, and also in another way, in terms of where the squad's a side that I think finished third last season, was the third best team in the country, got 82 points, was a squad worthy of 82 points. I don't think in a coaching sense, Jurgen, other than coping with the injuries, I don't think Jurgen works a miracle last season. I just think he does his job to 8 out of 10, maybe 7, maybe 8. And then leaves behind. Therefore, what par is, this squad should get 80 points minimum. It should have a good European run. It should be at the business end of domestic cups. And the best thing about Slot is he's not turned up and said, well, it's going to be difficult without Jurgen. It's going to take a period of transition. Slot has said last season's there to be built on. Not it's transition, not it's going to take time. That's there to be built on. Let's just build on that and go from there. And I've been so buoyed by that. And I also agree. You know, I think that you can look at a couple of Liverpool's players and say they're another year older and do it in a sad voice. Or you can look at a couple of Liverpool's players and say, hey, they're another year older and do it with an upbeat voice. And there's more of Camp 2 than there is of Camp 1. Also, you can say Liverpool were unlucky with injuries last year, or maybe they could have looked after the players a little bit better. That's a conversation that will be had around Klopp. So let's just say it's unlucky. Well, then if they're a bit lucky with injuries this year, we can expect a bit more. Or we can say if they're better with the condition and the way they approach the games this year, we can expect a bit more. If that's the case, then we can expect a bit more than 82 points. Slot is not looking for hiding places. Not at all. And so for me, I'm really excited by the season. I think this is a season Liverpool can challenge. It's obviously a big game on Sunday with Manchester United. But Man United are weird. They're almost just like, it's too weird what goes on there. I'm not going to take, even if we win the game, I'm not going to take loads from the game other than be delighted we've got the points. Because they're such a weird team at the moment, Manchester United. It's hard to sort of do a decent analysis on them. The test of this side is going to be what we see in September and October. In September, Liverpool have got quite straightforward games in the league, but they'll have 2 tough Champions League games. And then in October, suddenly, we'll see what they do against Chelsea and Arsenal. And then from there, we'll begin to sort of be able to make our judgments. So I'm genuinely buoyed, excited. I feel as though it's a good squad. I don't feel as though it's perfect. I think it could have done with another couple of additions. But ultimately, I think there is the strength there, there's depth there, and there is the idea, I think, of being able to look to challenge this season and then use this season then to be the next building block and go from there.
Let's talk about the incomings, Neil, because they've signed Federico Chiesa from Liverpool for what, 10.5 million roughly pounds. Yep. And they've sold the Georgian goalkeeper Gigio Mamadashvili from forget what club he was at, but they've signed him from
and he's gone back to Valencia on loan.
Yeah, from Valencia, that's right. And he had a fantastic Euros where Georgia was basically like, hey, our strategy defensively is just shoot it at this guy and he'll just stop everything. And then like that was essentially what they were doing defensively, like just keep shooting at him, and you'll just keep saving them, and that's fine. And that's, you know, good future planning for Alisson. What are your thoughts on those 2 signings? And then where else do you feel like Liverpool are missing? Do you feel like they're missing that holding midfielder, Fabinho kind of role player? Where are they missing in this squad?
So I think Chiesa comes in and he covers, I think first and foremost, because of the injuries, Liverpool supporters would like a lot of players. That doesn't mean Arne Slot would. So I think Slot will be happy with the size of the squad. I think no one's asked him this question. It's somewhat frustrating. Like, how big do you think the squad needs to be? But I think he wants 23. 3 goalkeepers and 20 outfield players. 1 for every position. Sorry, 2 for every position. And I think with Chiesa, I think he hit the point of, right, the squad's now the right number, and then it becomes a quality question. So I think Chiesa's a really good, smart signing. He's a player Liverpool have tracked for 4 years minimum, probably even longer. Play both sides if you need him to play left or right, but I think for us, he'll probably do a little bit more work off the right in terms of alternating with, substituting for, and covering for Salah. I think we'll see that be his primary role, at least in the first half of this season, and then maybe he'll move around a little bit. But I think Liverpool now know they need to protect Salah a tiny little bit, and this option allows us to do that. Salah plays so many games, and when he plays games, he tends to play 90 minutes. But there's some sort of point where I think we need to make sure we keep Salah as sharp as possible. So Chiesa bodes well around that. I'm really pleased with it. It's smart business. It can't go that wrong. And if it does, well, we'll just roll with the punches. Not everything always has to work all the time. The goalkeeper's really smart. May never play for Liverpool. Alisson seems really happy. Might sign a new deal. He's made that sort of noise recently, Alisson. But that said, this lad is, this is a very modern football thing. Liverpool do not need this goalkeeper right now. The market for goalkeepers is really weird at the moment. Not many have moved this summer to big clubs. Ramsdale's just gone to Southampton, for instance. There's not been that many big goalkeeper moves. So I think Liverpool have seen that Valencia are financially in a little bit of trouble, of being able to make this move. And now they've got this asset. So if Alisson chooses to leave to wherever, I think when Alisson goes, he'll go home. I think Alisson will go into not quite semi-retirement, but I think his next club will be in Brazil. So it'll be that idea of, I've done European football, now it's finished, let's go. We go from there. So I'm sort of the view that that's what you'll get to see from Alisson. But that might be 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line. But Liverpool have now got this goalkeeper and they can make a decision accordingly. For
And
me, therefore, if we say the squad's full, I think that it could be a little better in a couple of areas. So I think if Liverpool had bought a deep lying midfielder, and we know they wanted Zubimendi, they get as close to buying Zubimendi as you can get as close to buying a player as possible. And I think if they'd have bought Zubimendi, they'd have sent Endo away. So I think Endo or Tyler Morton, or maybe both, wouldn't be playing for Liverpool this season if Zubimendi had been signed. As it is, they don't. So Endo and Tyler Morton are both still on the books. Morton plays a lot of games last season in the Championship and plays the season before in the Championship. But he's now on Liverpool's books going into next season, so into the season proper. So I think he might get used a little bit. And Endo has not made a move, and he was linked away a little bit as well. I think they'd have done that. I think there was some talk Joe Gomez might go, and I think if Joe Gomez had gone, they wouldn't have been like if they'd have got a good offer for him up to 40 million. I think they'd have taken it and looked to get in the centre half who plays more on the left hand side as a specialist, or can also cover left back. I think they'd have looked for that player because I think that they need to back Van Dijk up a little bit on that side, but the offer doesn't come for Gomez. Gomez has stayed, and I think they'll use Gomez willingly. And I think Gomez is a really good player, so I'm not worried about that. I just think that it's a shame not to have that sort of more specialist left-sided central defender who can pass the ball distances with his left foot, because that's what Van Dijk's brilliant at. Gomez isn't that player. Konate's not that player. Quansah's not that player. So it is a little bit of a weakness there, but ultimately Liverpool have got 4 good centre-backs. How many do you need? Some Liverpool supporters would say 5 or 6, by the way, because we've had this season with those injuries that we've talked about. But Arne Slot doesn't say that. I don't think Arne Slot thinks that. I think there's a size of squad Arne Slot wants, which is not too big, but it's big enough. And then I think the other area where I thought Liverpool might do something in the round and haven't is left back. I think Robertson is now of a certain age and has an injury last season, which worries you a little bit. But also the problem is there's just a drop from Robertson to Tsimikas. So it's not the idea really that Robertson's about to be on his last legs. It's instead more if you did want to protect him, it would be better if he had an option that he could alternate with a little bit more rather than just an option which is pure cover. And I think Tsimikas is just pure cover. I think you play Tsimikas when you can't play Robertson, if you see what I mean. And what worries me about that is that's how players get overplayed, because ultimately if you're a football manager and you need to win the next game, you don't, you look at it and you go, well, he's much better than him. Can I just pick that one? Well, that one's played the last 6. Yeah, but, can we just make it 7? And then that's where things go a bit awry. So I think that it would have been nice if they'd have been able to get cover for Robertson and move Tsimikas on. That's not to say Tsimikas is crap. He's not. He's just not quick. The ultimate Tsimikas thing is that he's a little bit, he's a little bit lax at times, a little bit of game intelligence, but he can't fix it with pace. I think Robertson's about as canny an operator as there is, but even when Robertson makes a mistake, he's got genuine pace to get back, and I think he's underrated how quick he is in attack. So when Robertson doesn't play, we just miss him. We pass the ball into the area where Andy Robertson would be, and Tsimikas is just 3-4 yards too deep, can't get there. I think Liverpool really miss Robertson in his absence. So if they could have got themselves a pacey left back, then I'd be going, okay, great. If they'd have swapped Gomez for another quality centre back, I'd be saying, okay, great. If they'd have got Zubimendi in and let Endo go and done all of what I've just described, then I'd be saying, well, there's 4 upgrades. We got 80 points last season. Can we get 95? As it is, I think that that's not to say this Liverpool side can't win a lot of games, can't challenge for the title, and if luck breaks their way, can't win it. I think they can. But I do think that those other areas, maybe they'll come back in January and have a little look, either at a deep line midfielder. But all of that said, Gravenberch started really well playing as the deepest line midfielder. I think it's more a deep line midfielder than the idea of what gets called a number 6. I don't think it's just ball winning. It's the idea to be able to play the ball all the time as well. So I think Gravenberch's done well. I think we'll see Curtis Jones do some stuff there as well. I think we'll see Endo from time to time in that role. And I think that it's the biggest opportunity, really, career-defining opportunity, is Tyler Morton's. If Morton can sort of knuckle down and really take on what this manager wants, there's an opportunity here where he could say, I can solve this problem for Liverpool in conjunction with Gravenberch. We can do this between us. We can look after this position. So I think in a way, Tyler Morton's sort of the winner of Liverpool's transfer window, the way in which it's ended up going. But now he's got to show the level he can hit. And Liverpool have got to hope that he can hit that level. And you never know. You never know with young players. Sometimes all it needs is the sniff of an opportunity and they come on leaps and bounds.
Neil, I'm going to let you go, but I'd be remiss to not ask you one more question, and it revolves the futures of 3 players at Liverpool, and I want you to peer into your crystal ball here. Mohamed Salah, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, undoubtedly world-class, once-in-a-generation kind of players, all happen to be at the same club at the same time, and they all happen to be out of contract in the summer. Peer into your crystal ball for me here. What are the futures of those three players?
I worry with this because I worry that, in the same way that people supposedly gamble on outcomes they want, I sort of think all three are going to sign another deal. I think it makes a ton of sense for Salah to want to be at Liverpool up until the 2026 World Cup. So whatever it is he does next, Egypt are almost certainly going to qualify for from the games already. Egypt should be qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. And I feel as though Salah's future, everyone wants to always say Salah's future sort of errs towards Saudi Arabia. I think if you look at so much of what Salah does, I think his future in terms of how he perceives himself as a person, as a citizen of the world, I think it errs towards the United States. I think it errs towards the MLS. And I think it would make a ton of sense for Salah to do one more year with Liverpool, see if he can get 2 more attempts at winning League and Champions League. And then if he does want to go make a big money move, to look at what Messi's done rather than look at what Ronaldo's done. And I've just long had that sort of sense. And given Salah's excellence and his fitness, it just wouldn't surprise me if everyone ends up in, well, let's just do the same thing for another year territory for Liverpool and for Salah. So the idea that he effectively just renews a season on the same terms. And then we're back in this conversation, and it might be that if you were to get me in 12 months' time because you've loaned another Liverpool player, I might still be saying, you know what, he meant to another year beyond then because of his fitness, because of his excellence. It might be that it just makes a ton of sense. I feel as though that's where that one will end up. I think Van Dijk, everyone's quite relaxed about. I think that Liverpool are relaxed, and I think that Virgil van Dijk is quite relaxed as well. And I think that if the only thing that worries me with Van Dijk is everyone becomes too relaxed, it gets to January and suddenly he's able to get exceptionally lucrative offers from abroad. I think Liverpool, I'd like them to sort of pursue this one a little bit, but I think if they were to pursue it now, they could quite easily get Van Dijk to agree a 2-year extension. I think Liverpool might want a bit more data around that, but I think Liverpool have also got to look at the marketplace. I don't look across Europe at the minute and see a really straightforward purchase to get a footballer in who replaces Virgil van Dijk. Even players who I rate really highly, a good example being Branthwaite at Everton. Not that we could buy him necessarily, but let's just say we could. I think Branthwaite's got loads of qualities, but the thing I talked about before, when Nat Phillips becomes valid, what's he like pace on the turn? Well, we know that Virgil's great pace on the turn, and he won't always be. But, I think if you're going to buy, in inverted commas, the next Van Dijk, I don't quite see, as I say, I don't see a natural candidate. I see lots of good players who could do with a bit of work. I still like Colwill, but I'd like Colwill to do a year playing for Liverpool with Virgil van Dijk before you did anything around that one. So I sort of struggle with that a little bit, and I think that Van Dijk might extend as well. And then with Trent, I think Trent's almost the one I'm really oddly least secure in that I just think if it was straightforward, it would have happened by now. But I think if ultimately Trent sees what his plan is around Slot, then I think it's good. My biggest concern with Trent is actually stuff that doesn't pertain to Liverpool. I just think if I was Trent Alexander-Arnold, what worries me is the idea he might just fancy going to live abroad and not having this relentless focus on everything he does badly. Every game be placed on him. Like, if I was Trent Alexander-Arnold, the football programme I most despise would be Monday Night Football. Because I think the focus that it's a really funny thing. Mo Salah could be the greatest player ever to play for Liverpool. He's definitely in Liverpool's all-time 11. Virgil van Dijk could be the greatest centre-back to ever play the game. That might be an overstatement if people think that that's fine, but he could well be Liverpool's greatest ever centre-back to play the game. The Liverpool player who would attract the most attention, the most clicks for the last 5 seasons has been Trent Alexander-Arnold because of the relationship with the English national team and because the country's foremost pundits played right back. And genuinely, if I was Trent, there'd be a bit of me going, well, if Real Madrid would just take me for nothing, and I never had to put up with this, or only had to put up with it when it was Champions League, or when there's a bit of England chat, well, is my life easier? Is my life better? I get to play for Real Madrid, boss. My mate plays here, and that's what worries me really, as much as the idea of what Liverpool can or can't offer him, or anything like that. I just feel there'd be a bit in the back of my mind, just going, do I need this? Do I need the idea that, I don't pick up... Kieran Trippier doesn't pick up his man at the back post. It barely gets a mention. Kyle Walker doesn't pick up his man at the back post. No one says a word because they all think Kyle Walker's a good defender. It's just one mistake here and there. Reece James is some sort of mythical king from over the sea because he never kicks a fucking football in a match. so everyone acts like he's great because he doesn't have to do 10 games back to back. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Liverpool's vice captain, and he gets one thing wrong in a game and Liverpool get punished for it, and they'll do the thing where they magnify his bit. They'll magnify his bit when they look to run the bit through, because it drives engagement, it drives attention, it drives eyeballs. And I just think it would be perfectly valid if Trent just sort of thought to himself, you know what, I don't want this. Liverpool can offer me 400 grand a week. I don't care. I can get 300 grand a week at Real Madrid, and this doesn't happen to me. And we can just crack on from there. So that's what worries me more than anything else where Trent's concerned, is the idea that he just doesn't need to be the centre of the country's attention.
Neil Atkinson at the Anfield Wrap. Neil, thank you very much for your insights. I agree. Trent Alexander-Arnold is a world-class player, and it does seem that there is, I'm not going to say an agenda because that's a loaded word, but there is. No,
he just gets
they do highlight his mistakes. If you look at the England games with the Euros, a lot of them were caused by the fullback not picking up the guy. And I'm like, and that's why I feel like sometimes he was picked in midfield, because it was like, hey, if this goes belly up, the scapegoat's named Trent Alexander-Arnold because I played him in midfield. He gets dropped. They bring in Mainu and Gallagher, and they're like, hey, it's working now because this guy's out the team. And, he's so much of a unique and talented footballer that hopefully his talents stay in England and hopefully they stay in Liverpool. But Neil, I've took up way too much of your time on transfer deadline day. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your insights with Nat Phillips and Liverpool in general.
Thanks, Corey.